And the Social Security Administration is not going to call Jane and
No.
say, hey, we saw John passed away. We should be sending you $1,000 more a month. No way. They're going to wait for Jane to figure it all out and Jane to file for that extra $1,000 a month through a survivor benefit. Welcome to Zacc Call Money Education. I'm Zacc Call. This is The Guided Path. We're in episode 2 of season 1. So season 1 is all about organizing your income and the basics of financial planning. And today we're talking about Social Security. The previous episode was on all of the different steps and the order in which you should organize your income. And today literally is just Social Security. There are so many aspects of Social Security to go over. And you, as you approach the door to making that decision, you really need to know how Social Security works and how you calculate your benefit and when to take it. So we're going to cover that. I'm Zacc Call, and I have Tony with me today.
And for more information on Capita Financial Network, you can check out the links below, including disclosures and more information.
This entire season is all about income planning and specifically Social Security today. So we're going to get into the basics of Social Security as well as the complexity of how to know when to file. We have an entire season on Social Security. Reminder here that this is episode 2 in season 1. Season 1 is income planning. In season 2, we will go much, much deeper into Social Security. So, Tony, just a little bit of background here as well. Capita, our advisory firm, we really do specialize in Social Security planning. We spend a ton of time doing it. So we're really only going to be able to scratch the surface today, but that's the goal, is let's give everyone a basic understanding of how Social Security works. And then if you are watching this, if those out there are watching this episode, and we have already created season 2, because we haven't done that yet. Mm-hmm. Once we've created season 2, if you feel like I really got to dive deeper into Social Security, you could bounce from this episode and go into all of the episodes in season 2. Otherwise, if you're following in order, we're going to talk about Social Security, and then we'll get into pension decisions next. We're doing it in a specific order so that the near retiree or the retiree knows the order in which to make these decisions and how to layer on the different parts of your income. Okay. So we're going to dive right into why we think Social Security should be one of the first decisions you make when you are organizing your income. And again, this is for the person out there who is either, let's call it 50, 55, 60, or just right about to retire. And for some people who have just retired and they're thinking about how to organize all their income. If you are 20, 30, 40, I think it's helpful for you to know this stuff, but you're not making any decisions for a couple of decades, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, so Social Security is a bedrock of your financial plan because here in the U.S., most people have access to some sort of Social Security benefit. So you have a benefit that is going to be for your entire life, as well as a survivor benefit for your spouse if you're married. And the benefit will go up with inflation. It has in the past. And it has spousal benefits. And I mentioned survivor benefits just now. So there are quite a few aspects of it, and it is available to most everyone. If you have worked for what's called 40 quarters, which is 10 years, but they do it in quarters so that you don't have to have exactly a whole year consecutive work to get that credit. So any 40 quarters, spread over your entire lifetime qualifies you for Social Security. But they take 35 years worth of earnings. So let's say that you worked for 40 quarters or 10 years, and that's it. They would put in 25 years of zeros in the calculation with your 10 years of work to figure out what your Social Security benefit is. And we'll get into how benefits are calculated more in season 2, but there's a little secret in here that on your first $12,000 of income per year, they're giving you a lot of Social Security benefit for that. And then from about $12,000 to about $80,000, they're really not giving you nearly as much. $80,000 to about $170,000, it's less. And after that, it's nothing.
And just a brief question about, like, when you say benefit, like they give you benefit, what does that just a brief description of what that
Totally.
means.
So that means that at retirement, you will get an income from the government. And I don't want to say it exactly like that because you paid into it. You know, I mean, you deserve it. It's not like they're being kind to you here.
Yeah.
But you will get a payment from the government on a monthly basis based on how much money you paid in during your lifetime and your own earnings.
And that's part of when you're taxed, like for your income. That's part of that is a Social Security tax, right?
Yeah. So when you earn income, it's called FICA tax.
Right.
And you pay 6.2% of your income away, and that goes into the Social Security fund. I wish that they set that aside for you and then let that grow, and then you got your own money back. It's not how that works.
Okay. That's how I always envisioned it, so I'm glad I asked.
It would be wonderful. If that's how it worked, we would all have much bigger Social Security benefits than we're getting. What's happening there is the money is coming in and immediately going out to pay retirees that are currently taking benefits.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah.
So, yeah, great question, Tony. So you are paying in, and that money is immediately going out, and that's what makes people a little bit nervous. We'll talk a little bit about the sustainability of the fund today and how that could look.
Okay.
So anyway, you get this benefit in retirement. And if your income is low, they're giving you a lot of bang for your buck for that 6.2% FICA tax, Social Security tax. And by the way, if you are self-employed, then you pay at twice as much because the employer also has to pay 6.2. The employee has to pay 6.2 and the employer has to pay 6.2. So here at Capita, we have 60 employees. And each employee is having 6.2 by law. We have to withhold 6.2 of your paycheck and put it into that fund, basically the Social Security fund. By law, the company is also required for whatever an advisor pays in FICA tax. We have to double that basically and put that in as well.
Oh, okay.
So 12.4 of every employee's income is going. The tricky part is if you are self-employed, you're just very aware of both sides of it because you're both the employer and the employee.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what's going in. And based on the calculation of what goes in and how much income you earned over your lifetime, they pay you back out income, and that's called your primary insurance amount. It's confusing because it's not really like an insurance policy, but it's social insurance. That's why they use that word. So it's the idea of taking care of our elderly and folks who are in retirement. Okay, so that's the basics of what's going on with Social Security. We think it's important to start with building in Social Security and then layering on pensions and rental income or royalties or other fixed income sources, and then finally layering on the top of that how much you are going to withdraw from the wealth that you've created personally.
Okay.
And the reason Social Security we believe should be first is because there's a pretty complicated break-even analysis that needs to be done, and it's important to analyze that in isolation and then look at it with everything else. So we'll get into that. Let's talk. I'm going to dive right into just some key basics of Social Security and key benefits. And of course, you fire away, Tony, and ask any question you think anybody needs to know out there. Okay. So today we're going to cover what are the retirement benefits. We're going to cover will Social Security be there for people when they get to retirement. We will cover how much they should expect to receive, a little bit about how people apply, spousal strategies, and a little bit about like survivor strategies, and then organizing all of that together. You can see why that turns into a whole season because there's quite a bit. We're going to hit the surface on all this. Okay, the benefits of Social Security. It's lifetime income. It will pay for your entire life, and if you're married, for the life of your spouse as well. And then it has cost of living adjustments. The acronym for that is COLA, C-O-L-A. So if you ever see that, you're hearing that they're going to increase the benefit at some point. And those cost of living adjustments I'll go over those. They've been really high and they've been zero and they never have gone negative. So it's always either just stayed the same or gone up.
And is that a national thing or is it by state?
Perfect question. National.
Okay.
So this whole program is a national thing.
Okay.
So everything we're talking about should apply to anybody who is paid into the benefits and has a record and qualifies here in the U.S. Okay. It allows for spousal benefits and survivor benefits. A lot of Corporate pensions don't. So these are reasons why like Social Security is better than a standard pension. And then potential for delayed credits, meaning if you said, I want to wait until 70 to take my Social Security, they're going to pay you more than if you took it at 62. So that's the idea of delaying it and having it be a greater benefit. So that's benefit number 4. And then benefit number 5 is potential tax advantages. If you take money out of your retirement accounts or if you go earn income, all of it is included on your taxable income for that year for taxes. Social Security always gives you some back tax-free, and it could be all of it back tax-free. Depends on how much other income you have.
Okay.
So lifetime income, cost of living adjustments, you have spousal and survivor benefits, potential for delayed credits, and then a little bit better tax treatment. Those are 5 key benefits of Social Security, which make Social Security better than your standard pension.
Right.
All right, so cost of living adjustments. Back in the 80s, if you talk to people who were buying homes back then, they talk about paying interest of 17% on their mortgages, which is crazy.
That is.
And they would buy a lot smaller homes and a lot less expensive homes because that much interest would destroy your finances if you stretched too far. Back then, like in 1980, there was a 14.3% cost of living adjustment on Social Security. So for every $1,000 of Social Security you were getting, they increased your monthly payment to $1,140. So that's a pretty solid benefit. There were several years of zero, not like 2009, 2010, 2015. In 2022, we had 8.7, which was really nice. It was interesting. In 2016, it was 0.3%. And I remember thinking that year, wait a second, this seems a little bit off. They are telling us that 0.3% is the cost of living adjustment we're going to give on Social Security. So to me, that's kind of a signal as to what they think inflation was. And then at the same time, you remember how I said you have to pay FICA tax up to a certain level? They increased that number by 7%. So in the same year, they basically told me that inflation was 7 and my dad inflation was 0.3. It's like, wait a second.
Oh my.
Because he's receiving benefits, you're only going to raise it by 3, but because I'm paying taxes, you're raising that by 7. I tell you that not because I'm angry or bothered, but because a lot of people are really stressed about Social Security being around. And that's a weird, nerdy way for us to know that they're tweaking little things here and there that nobody even pays attention to. So I think it's going to be okay from a Social Security sustainability for most people. But I think people worry about it, and that's fair. So
does it fluctuate a lot, like year by year, or does it take like 5, 10, 20 years for it to really fluctuate the levels? Because you're mentioning the 80s versus 2008, 2009, 2010. Like obviously it can't be predicted, but like
right.
It like what does the trend usually say in terms of how often it fluctuates?
Every year they assess it, and if you look back over the last 50 years, it's been around 2.5 to 4.5% most every year. But you get the last 5 years 1.3, 5.9, 8.7, 3.2, and 2.5. So you have a pretty decent range.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time it's going to be between 2.5 to 4.5. But you see, there was 1 year under it and 2 years over that. But over time, it should average in that range.
Right. And obviously, since there's no way to predict this, and maybe this question's a little too vague, but this obviously affects like when someone would plan to retire, right? Just based on how that fluctuates. So obviously, like retirement planning isn't like. It's not like I make a decision 1 month and then I'm retired the next month. It's like I plan for it. It could be months, years, or whatever that I'm looking ahead. I'm like, I want to retire by this year. So, but those decisions can change just based on where those percentages are.
Absolutely. Probably not a ton on how much the cost of living adjustment is on Social Security, because how much. Let's say you needed $100,000 a year to live. And over the last year, you would need to increase that number just because groceries are more expensive and cars are more expensive. Everything's more expensive. So you would probably say, actually, that's now $108,000. And over here, the estimate on Social Security should also get a cost of living adjustment, probably a little bit less, but but it should get a cost of living adjustment. So both of those factors going up means that it won't change the calculation a ton for when you should retire. It does impact the break-even analysis, which we'll talk about. So some people get this wrong where they say, well, I should take it at 62 or maybe 67 or 70. Well, at what point am I actually breaking even? How long do I have to live for the benefit, taking the benefit at 67 to be the same, because I waited, to be the same as taking it at 62, that moment that starting earlier or starting later catches up to getting money now, right? That moment is called the break-even age.
Yeah.
And that a cost of living adjustment will impact that, because if you take a larger benefit later and there's a 5% cost of living adjustment, that's going to increase that larger benefit because you're multiplying it by a larger number, right?
Right.
So it's a great idea and great question.
Sorry, I derailed a little bit.
No, you're great. You brought up a really good point though, that although we do have people come meet with us, they're like, hey, I already told my boss I retired. Let's figure it out. That's not ideal. Like, you really should be looking at it years in advance, and you should be running it on an annual basis to determine if you're on track to have the right retirement that you need to be able to enjoy your life. And if you're not doing that years in advance, you might be really surprised by what your retirement picture is going to look at. So I really like what you're saying about, hey, this is something you should look at. The cost of living adjustments probably won't impact that too much.
Okay.
Okay. So the next question I get often is, hey, will Social Security be there for me in the future? And if you look at the Social Security Fund, and we're waiting on, so it's April right now. In May every year, they come out with new numbers to tell us how the fund is doing. So I'm working off of the numbers that came out last year, which this is 2025. So in 2024, they gave us the numbers for 2023, and there was $2.7 trillion in the fund. Sometimes that number's really hard to conceptualize because a trillion is hard to even understand. But yeah. I think it's just important to understand that relative to the year before, it was 2.8 trillion. So it went down a little bit. They had 1.3 trillion in income and it was 1.35 trillion in income, 1.39 trillion in expenses. So $41 billion of net outflow that's why the fund came down.
Oh, wow.
So that's what's going on there. Now, if that trend continues and no change is made, like whatsoever, then in about 2035, so it's 2025 right now, so about 10 years from now, they're saying that payments would need to be reduced to 83% of what they're paying now, and then flushing that money through the system. The FICA tax you and I pay, going out to the retirees, would still sustain 83% of their benefits. So a lot of people get really nervous thinking like, and they hear this date, they're like, okay, in 2035, none of us are getting anything. That's not the case.
Right.
In 2035, you'd be getting 83% if no changes are made. But there are so many changes, and they have made changes in the past, and that date keeps getting pushed out because they keep making little changes here and there. They can change when they do how much they do for cost of living adjustments. They can change our full retirement age. They've already done that. It used to be 65 and then 66 and then 66 in 2 months and 4 months and 6 months and so on until we're currently sitting at 67. But by the time you and I retire, maybe it'll be 75. Who knows? So they keep pushing that date out when you can get your benefit at like the full benefit, and that will help the overall fund. They've talked about, at about $170,000, you stop paying that 6.2% FICA tax. They've talked about reintroducing it up at $400,000. So people who make a lot of income per year would have to pay FICA tax again on the income above a certain level. That was something that Biden in the beginning of his administration really was pushing for. Didn't go through. I don't know if you remember, but he had like 400,000 was a mark where he wanted to do a bunch of things that would cause folks over that level to have greater taxes.
Yeah.
This was one of those ideas that you would have to pay. You'd have to reintroduce that 6.2% tax on income above 400,000. I don't necessarily think that would have worked super well. I'm not like saying politics one way or the other. I'm just saying most people who make that much money, especially who are business owners, pay themselves a salary that's under that, and you only have to pay FICA tax on the salary, not on all the other earnings as a business owner. You have to pay it on your earned income as a worker. So I just don't think it would have had the effect that they had hoped. Didn't go through anyway. But the point is, there are quite a few things they can do to keep pushing that out. And I believe the voting population's big enough of people receiving Social Security that there's going to be the right will in there to make the way possible of pushing that date out. And whenever I do analysis on Social Security, I'm always assuming that people in their 60s right now will have their full benefit until they die.
Wow. Okay.
So I don't stress as much about that. I mean, I'm 40. I think it will be, I personally do my own financial planning without calculating Social Security at all, assuming that it's gone. So I get why people are stressed. I actually do all my financial planning without it, thinking, great, if it's there, it'll just mean that my wife and I get to do a little bit more traveling and things like that. Okay. So that is the question of will it be there for you? So in terms of, let's talk about taxes. So people are going to get at least 15% of their Social Security back tax-free. 85% is the maximum that they include on your tax return. If you have less income, and we have some charts, so maybe we can share some of this stuff as we're talking, and maybe it's funny because they probably have already seen stuff that we're sharing. But yeah. Okay, it's not my experience, Tony. Okay, so the taxability of Social Security depends on all your income. And it's a two-part calculation and then the lesser of the two. So it's not like a super simple thing. It's not crazy math either. It's just multiple steps to figure it out. So we've built some tools, and we can share a tool that we've built. If anybody wants it, we can just send it to you. I guess that's on you to figure out how to make that happen. Yeah. Okay. So if you are joint filing or single, it changes, but give you an example. Well, actually, let me tell you a story. I got a call from a financial advisor once after talking about how this is calculated. And he said, wait a second, I thought that it was anything over 30, or anybody who had income less than 32,000 wasn't taxed. And between 32 and 44, they were only including half. And then above 44, they had to include 85%. Now, the reason that the financial advisor was confused, and this is not somebody here, just somebody, a friend, lots of friends in the industry, right? And anyway, the reason that he was confused is because it's in the middle of that calculation that you use those percentages to multiply the income by that percentage, but then it comes to the end and there's still more calculation to be done until you determine your actual taxability. So literally someone could be taxed 0 and then every percentage all the way up to 85%. It could be any number in between there. And a lot of financial advisors get this wrong, is the point. And I think it's important. That's why we have the tool. We give it to people and they can see it. But let me give you an example. If somebody had $30,000 of other income and $50,000 of Social Security, only has to include about $16,000 of that Social Security, 31% of it. They don't have to include all 50. So the $16,000 of their Social Security, $30,000 of other income, they have to include all of their retirement withdrawals and pension. And we're now talking about $46,000 of income that shows up on their tax return. And we'll talk about taxes in later seasons, but a joint filing status, they're reducing about $30,000 even with a standard deduction. Their tax bill is what they owe on about $16,000. So that's the other thing, is a lot of people will tell you that you're going to just be annihilated by taxes in retirement. And when I say a lot of people, I mean the Saturday radio finance shows. If you listen to those at all,
clickbait.
Exactly. They'll tell you that you're going to just get murdered by taxes. The reality is your tax today, if you're working, is probably way worse than your tax rate or tax liability in retirement if tax rates stay the same. Now, if tax rates go through the roof, then that could change, right? And a lot of people feel like they will. But most people we see actually have a better tax situation in retirement than what they had while they were working. Okay, so that's the taxability of Social Security. And we talked about cost of living adjustments. Will it be there for people? And taxability of it. Now, a brief explanation of of survivor benefits and spousal benefits. So let's talk about my situation right now. My wife doesn't quite have the 10 years of working history. I think she's at like 8. Because we had twins after having a 2-year-old, and we tapped out. Like she had to help them, and take care of them at home. So if she doesn't go back to work and earn the full 10 years worth, she's eligible still for a spousal benefit off of my record. And I don't know the rationale here, but it seems to me that they're basically saying like, hey, this is a valuable part of our society to rear children in the best way we possibly can. How do we quantify that contribution and take care of that person in their old age as well? Well, let's give them 50% of what their primary worker benefit is.
Okay.
So that's how that works. It doesn't take away from my benefit. It's not like she gets 50 and I get 50. I get my own calculation. I get more if I wait. I get less if I take it early. I get the 100% if I take it at full retirement age. And then she has a similar calculation that is 50% of my benefit at her full retirement age, or less earlier and more later. So that's the spousal benefit. So if both of us took it at our full retirement ages, then we'd be getting 150% of my benefit.
And is that full retirement age? Remind me what that is like.
For us right now, it's 67. For 67. You, me, all of us, it's 67.
Okay.
I don't count on that staying the same though, because they went from 65 to 66, and then from 1955 to 1960, they added 2 months. So if you were born in 1956, then your full retirement age was 66 and 4 months. So they had this rule that phased it from 66 to 67 over the course of, like 6 years or so?
Yeah, okay.
5 years.
And then remind me, so even if your wife didn't get those 10 years, you don't have to work, 12 years to make up for those 2 years in order for her to get that benefit, right?
Yeah, no.
It's just those 40 quarters.
Exactly. Exactly. You have to have been married for 10 years to the spouse. There are other circumstances, but like...
but you're not making up the difference, like that the spouse didn't finish. It's like you...
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good question. Okay, so there are some spousal rules to go over, and I'll explain what I mean by that 10 years, because if you're currently married, that's okay, but there are even benefits for divorced folks. So like, let's say that a guy, and I've actually run into this, where a guy has been married to 3 different people, each for more than 10 years. He can get full benefits on his own record, and all 3 of his ex-spouses can pick up the 50%.
Oh my gosh.
And none of that's coordinated with each other, especially if he's divorced from all 3, then he can take his own benefit. Nobody's going to know when anyone else files. And so there's 250% of his benefit going out to different people.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, that can happen. Okay, survivor benefits, you get all of your spouse's benefit. If your spouse passes away and you file at your full retirement age, you get 100% of the benefit, not 50. And that's key, because when you're doing a filing strategy between 2 spouses, if you wait, it goes up, right? And if you wait and really increase one of those benefits, that's the benefit that's going to stick around if you pass away. So let's pretend we have somebody who has a $2,000 benefit and somebody has a $1,000 benefit. They're married. If you wait for the if you wait on the primary earner until that person turns 70, then now we're talking about $2,700 or so of benefit. And then if one of them passes away, it doesn't matter who. If the primary earner passes away, then the lower income earner is going to let go of their benefit, and they're going to pick up $2,700. If the lower income spouse passes away, the primary earner is going to stay on their $2,700. So it's important to realize the larger benefit sticks around, the smaller benefit disappears. So when I calculate the break-even ages, I will always look at strategies where you file for the smaller benefit as early as possible and then wait on the larger benefit as part of a survivor benefit strategy to maximize the survivor benefit while getting as much of the one that might disappear as you can. And then, we call that longevity diversification. Like, you talk about diversification of your investments. Well, why not diversify the probability of what if one of us dies early, or what if we both live a long time, or what if one of us lives a really long time? kind of splitting the difference on those two strategies between spouses can help limit the risk of all of those things and not having to guess exactly how it's going to work out. Okay, so let's talk about, we talked about the Social Security fund. If I was in my 50s, 60s, I'd plan on it being there. If you are in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, I think you should build retirement plans without it and see how it goes. Talked about cost of living adjustments, spousal and survivor benefits. We'll get way more into that later. But let me give you just a couple rules since people are here for the Social Security part. Just a couple of rules that I think will help people understand, like, if they're eligible for a spousal benefit or not. Okay, so the spouse must be at least 62. So if my wife, she's actually older than me by a little bit, but if she was younger than me by 8 years or something like that, then even though I could file for my benefit, she would have to wait till she's 62 to be able to file for a spousal benefit. It's based on her age. Another key thing about spousal benefits, we talked about it growing from 62 to 70 on your own benefit. It stops growing at full retirement age on the spousal benefit. The max you can get is 50% of the primary worker's PIA. And I say that slowly because it's kind of technical, but we get that all the time. People are like, "Oh, I'm going to wait until 70 to take my spousal benefit because then I'll get much more." It's like, nope. At your full retirement age, spousal benefits stop growing. Okay. So that was my parents. My mom is 1 year younger than my dad, and my dad, also, you have to have the primary worker has to file to unlock the benefit for the spouse. So my dad, we were going to have him wait until 70 to really maximize it, but if he didn't file, my mom was missing out on income, and her benefit wasn't climbing after full retirement age. So we actually waited, since he's 1 year older, we waited for 1 year beyond full retirement age for him, because that's when my mom was full retirement age, and her benefit stops growing at that point as a spouse. So we filed his to unlock hers, and they were both on Social Security at 68 and 67.
Okay.
Okay.
Because that if they filed earlier, if he filed at full retirement age and she filed, or not, I guess if he filed at full retirement age, then it would have just locked her into that amount. Is that what it is?
So, yeah, great question. If he filed at full retirement age, it would have made it so his benefit was 100% of his full retirement benefit, right? If he files 1 year later, he gets 108%. That's what we were trying to get. We were trying to get his to grow as much as possible. But let's say that he waited for 1 more year to get 116%. He could have. But the problem is that my mom, she's not going to get a bump above that 50%. So getting him 108 to 116 made it so my mom didn't get any payments and she didn't get any benefit for waiting. And so the break-even age gets pushed further and further because she's getting the same payment whether she starts today or whether she starts in a year, makes it hard to catch up. And that extra 8% on his has to make up for the fact that she didn't get anything for a year when she could have.
Right.
So that was the reason that we had him file 1 year later. And the reason we didn't have him file right at his full retirement age is because we wanted as much growth as we could get on his until my mom stopped growing.
So that extra percentage on his wasn't worth as much as her reaching that full amount.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted her to be able to get, because we didn't want her to have to give up on income she had. It's just leaving money on the table.
Because it only reach a certain amount, and then it would plateau until she dies. But so so she would have kept. I mean, she would have had that income, the Social Security, that amount until she died
forever. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's like, okay, it's not growing anymore. Do you want it?
Yeah.
To get it, he has to file. And so that forced him into. I mean, that was our decision, but that we felt mathematically that forced him into filing. All right. Which makes sense.
The gears are turning. I'm starting to picture this.
Yes.
The 35 years from now, or 36 years from now.
That's good. That's more than I have. Okay. So that's spousal benefits. It does, for a divorcee, it's a little bit different. You don't that rule around like. Now, I would never tell my parents to get divorced over this, but that rule around like if they're married, the spouse has to file for the the spousal benefit to be available. If you're divorced, that's not the case. The primary earner just has to be over 62 so that the ex-spouse can file. So I like this rule because it makes it so that you don't have to go talk to your ex and be like, can you please file for your benefits so that I can get, and you know how many relationships they'd be like, yeah right, I'm actually not going to get income just to spite you, right? So I like that it eliminates the need for coordination there. If the primary worker is over 62, an ex can pick up a spousal benefit.
Okay.
And you can do that if you're unmarried. So if you get remarried, you can't like, oh, I know I'm married to this person, but I want the spousal from that person. You can't do that. It takes away so you have to be single to be able to do that.
Okay. And it's not like a choice either. Like they can be like, I still want that benefit. Like you don't get both. You get the current spouse.
Exactly.
Okay.
On spousal benefits.
Yeah.
Okay. That rule is not, this is why it's so complicated. Survivor benefits doesn't work like that. So a survivor could take the benefit of a deceased spouse even while they're married to somebody else if they get married to that other person after they turn 60. So a quick story to help you because there's a lot there, right?
Yeah.
We had a gal who was 59 and Mike, our founder, got a wedding invitation and he knows her age and he knows the Social Security strategy. And I'm going to make up a name here, but he was like, Julie, how set are you on this date? Because if you just push that out about 5 months, you won't lose your survivor benefit on your previous spouse because you'll be over 60 when you get married to your current spouse. And they actually pushed the wedding because it meant a lot of money to them. So that's how that rule can come into play. Now, we have had cases, and this is where like I want to be really clear. I'm not a marriage counselor. I'm not talking about like telling people what to do with their marriage, but technically we've seen it where a happily married couple can temporarily get divorced after 60 and then get remarried. And then from a technical standpoint, they are married after 60 to each other. So that can unlock a survivor benefit that was available but was lost because they got married before 60. So we have a whole episode on that on non-video version, but it's a weird scenario. It does come into play. Those are the rules for people to understand. All right. Survivor benefits can be taken as early as 60 instead of 62. So if you are dealing with a spouse who's passed away, plus you're married to someone or you might get married to someone and you have your own benefit, there's actually 3 benefits there that you might be eligible for. And depending on your situation, you might file for the survivor benefit at 60 while letting your own benefit grow all the way till 70, and then you switch. So it's not a matter of which benefit do I take. It's in what order do you take the benefits. You might actually do survivor at 60, your own at 70, or your own at 62, and survivor at full retirement age because survivor stops growing at that point. It just like spousal benefits do. So it's like, do I do it this order or do I do it this order? And that's where you run the math on both of them and figure out which one you take in what order. And that's all about the break even, which we'll go over that in much more detail later. Okay. So that's, before we dive into how should people think about the break even and filing ages, Tony, what do you think people need to know based on like this groundwork that we're hoping to lay around Social Security?
Honestly, you've answered a lot of my just like general questions about like what Social Security actually is, and obviously it's a lot of ages and numbers and planning, quite frankly. I think just kind of getting all your ducks in a row of just knowing this is my situation, I'm divorced, or, I lost a spouse, or, I'm 31, but my spouse died 5 years ago, or whatever, scenario. I think is the number one thing, is just planning that ahead and just getting all of my situations lined up so I can, maybe talk to someone about that and be like, hey, this is my situation. How do I capitalize on this? And these are resources that you can find online, but also like, I'm guessing, speaking to an advisor helps, to really kind of conceptualize, these are my multiple like contributing factors into my situation. I was totally oblivious to the fact that there were so many contributing factors to like the Social Security part of retirement.
I know you told us, you're like, I don't think this episode's going to be very long. We could probably get through that in like 20 minutes, right? I'm like, Tony, we've got hours of presentation material that we go on employer on site to teach their employees about this. Yeah, it's complicated. It's a lot. Okay, so you mentioned a couple things there. Let's talk about them. You mentioned to get your ducks in a row, as well as potentially working with a professional. So for anybody who's thinking about either of those topics, I'm going to give them a little bit of help, whether they talk to us or not, okay? So the first thing to think about with regard to Social Security is not when should I take it, but what is on my personal menu of options to order. Right? Because like I've talked to people where they came in and they didn't know, because this gal was married to three different people, divorced from one. The last one passed away. These two she had been divorced from, and one of those two had passed away as well. So she has two different survivor benefits. She has her own benefit, and deciding which and how to take those, like you need to know what's on your menu before you go into that conversation. Now,
and are these things kind of like logged in some sort of like governmental database?
Oh, I wish.
Like, so you just have to like have all this information obviously people do have this information, it's big parts of their lives, but there isn't just like some box that I check like, oh yeah, this is my spouse that I was married to for 10 years and she passed away or whatever. Like, yeah, it's not as simple as that.
It's so hard because the Social Security Administration has some good people there that know some of this stuff, but we usually recommend that people don't try to get in there for advice, because they're coached and told, because of the liability of getting it wrong, not to give like really specific advice. So it's tricky. Basically, you need to go through every relationship you've had, and so if you're single and always been single, you're talking about your own benefits, and that's fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
But if you've been married to anyone, you need to think about Social Security for each person that you were married to in your life, and think about the benefits that may exist for you and for that spouse because of that marriage. And that's probably your best checklist to go through. If you are really young and a spouse passes away, I constantly see people forget about benefits for kids and caretakers. It's not something we're talking about retirement benefits today, but if somebody like in their 30s passed away or 40s passed away and they have really young kids, like under 16 years old, they're going to pick up Social Security benefits immediately as survivors, as a family. So that's something else to talk about. But your question first is really good around like, how do I know and how do I get my ducks in a row? You can do a lot of research yourself. You can listen to our entire season on this, and we'll go through all the benefits you need to think about at retirement. Or you can talk to a professional and just make sure that you account for every single marriage you've had and your own benefits. So if you are going to talk to someone, I'm going to give you 3 things that people do wrong in calculating Social Security break-even ages. And you want to make sure that your advisor is accounting for all 3 of these items. And if so, you have an advisor who's pretty good at this, okay? So after they actually identify everything on your menu, which is hard to know if they got everything right, but let's say they get everything on the menu, you have to calculate cost of living adjustments into the break-even, or you're doing it wrong, right? You need to do Social Security as a team sport when you are married or have been married. You can't look at it in isolation, because like my parents, one spouse filing unlocks a benefit for the other person. So you have to do it as a team sport. The third one is more technical, but it matters. And so I'm hoping that people stay with us here, and I think they can. When you calculate a break even, you're deciding between, if I take money today, maybe it's $1,000, then every year I'm $12,000 ahead compared to waiting over here for a year, 2, 3, 4. But at some point, that 1,000 might be 1,200, 1,500. So at some point, that income is going to catch up, right? However, let's say you're retired, and in order to wait, you had to take $12,000 a year from your IRA or 401k because you didn't get that Social Security on the early filing. So waiting forces you to use your own money. It forces you to take money from your own portfolio, which is fine. That's what it's there for, except for the fact that there was growth on that money that you could have had if you could have left it alone. So it's the growth on money you didn't have to withdraw over here that helps when you took your Social Security benefit early. You got to leave that $12,000. And whatever rate of return you get, you have to multiply it by that and figure out what the growth on that is, and the growth on the growth, and the growth on the growth, and the growth. So there's a compounding effect there as well. And how do you calculate that? We had to build our own tools because we couldn't find any software that would account for it. So the idea is there's a pool of money over here if you file early, multiplied by whatever investment rate of return you think you can get based on your risk tolerance. It's going to push the break-even age out a little bit that this waiting strategy needs to make up for. And most financial advisors do a straight break-even, and they don't think about, okay, but the growth on the portfolio that you missed here and that you got here pushes it out a few more years. And I've seen it push it out 1, 2, 3 years for conservative investors, and I've seen it push it out 50 years for aggressive investors. So I had some where the individual needed to live to 130 years old to make it worth waiting because their particular situation with their spousal benefits and everything, plus the growth, and they thought they could get like 8% rate of return. So it pushed it to, you need to live to 125. How do you feel about that?
Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. So it didn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
And so then they chose to file early. Okay, those are the three things that I think in your break-even analysis need to exist. Cost of living adjustments, team sport, meaning the two different spouses filing together and a joint break-even calculation, and then the cost of you not getting the growth on your money because you had to take it out of your portfolio. Let's go through real quick the consequences of filing early and then the benefit of filing late, and then that will help people understand some of this break-even. So it depends on if your full retirement age is 66 or 67, and you can take this data if we want and put it in front on the screen here.
And is that age dependent on when you were born?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, birth year.
Okay. So if you were born in whatever, what year?
Yeah, so 1943 to 54, everybody in that group has a full retirement age of 66.
And so that date we've already hit that hit that date in terms of those people are all 66
exactly
by now.
Yeah. And then 1955 adds 2 months. 1956 adds another 2 months. So 66 and 2 months, 66 and 4 months until you get to 1960. And everybody born 1960 and later is age 67 right now.
Okay.
I think they're going to do another phase in like this and push it to 68, and then we'll be saying everybody born after 1970 or something like that is 68. And
can they backdate it like that?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I mean, people born in 1970 are 55. So they usually try to leave people alone who are already getting benefits, who are really close, because they know how much of an upheaval and politically that will be, right?
Yeah.
But those of us who are not people who are not in this business, and those who are younger than 60, they're not even thinking about it.
Yeah. For me, it's 1 year, 35 versus 36 years from now. It's like, okay.
Exactly. I mean, if you hadn't joined us here at Capita helping with all of this that we're doing today, and they changed your full retirement age from 67 to 70.
No idea.
Yeah. You'd be like, cool. What are we
All
doing?
right,
Yeah.
68.
Right. So
Let's round it up to 70.
That's why they mess with people who are not paying attention.
Right.
Yeah.
But now I'm paying attention.
Exactly.
Now I'm paying attention.
And what are you going to do about it, Tony? Okay. So if you file early at 62, your benefit could be reduced to 70 to 75%, depending on your full retirement age. They reduce it each year a little bit. Technically, it's every single month they reduce it a little bit. Some people will think, I got to wait till my birthday to get it because I want to get that whole year's worth of growth, and that's not how that works. They do it every single month. So if you filed at 65 and 3 months, you're getting benefit for every single month, including the 3 months after 65.
Okay.
And then at full retirement age, they'll give you 100% of your PIA. That's the primary insurance amount that we talked about. And another acronym is FRA. That's full retirement age. So at FRA, you get 100% of your PIA. That's like how they communicate it with you. And it's good for you to know, from everybody to know those two acronyms. If you apply for benefits after your FRA, or full retirement age, then they give you an 8% bump for waiting every year. So if your full retirement age is 66, At 67, you get 108. 68, you get 116, and so on until 132% of benefits at 70. That's how that calculation works.
Okay.
Anything you think we should add to that to help people understand on the basics of filing early and late? And
No, I think that's pretty clear, yeah.
okay. So we talked a little bit about divorced spouse eligibility and rules, survivor benefit eligibility and rules. We didn't cover all of those rules. But something to be aware of, it's kind of an awkward conversation when I'm talking to somebody and they say, oh yeah, I was married to so-and-so. We were married for more than 10 years, but now we're divorced. Well, that person could get a spousal benefit or survivor benefit. And oftentimes they're like, let's give you some fake names, but some scenarios I run into. So we have Jane here who has her own benefit for $2,000 a month. And half of her ex benefits might be $1,500, but her ex's benefit is $3,000, 100%, right? So as long as her ex, let's call him John, is alive, her spousal benefit is $1,500. But if John dies, her survivor benefit could go to $3,000. So she's sitting at 2, and the spousal's under 2, so she's going to keep getting her own benefit. But if John dies, she gets an extra $1,000 a month.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a little bit awkward because you kind of, every once in a while, it's important to tell people, like, I know you and John split up for a reason, right? But could you just keep track of if he's alive? Because as soon as he passes away, that's something you need to be aware of. And the Social Security Administration is not going to call Jane and say, hey, we saw John passed away. We should be sending you $1,000 more a month. No way. They're going to wait for Jane to figure it all out and Jane to file for that extra $1,000 a month through a survivor benefit.
Okay.
So that's how that works. Okay. So understanding things like when to switch benefits, how to organize your strategy, how to calculate the break-even, all of that is what goes into Social Security. And once you've built this basic Social Security plan where you've analyzed 2 or 3 different strategies, you understand the break-even, you understand the break-even with growth, and you've chosen one of those strategies, that's now going to inform you as to where you need to slide withdrawals in from your wealth. Because let's say you decide to wait on Social Security, you're going to withdraw a little bit more earlier to bridge that gap. Or if you take Social Security early, you might need to take income for a longer period of time, but more evenly over your accounts. So that changes how much money's coming out of the account. So that changes your investment strategy. So your Social Security decision should impact your investment strategy. For example, if you wait, you have 4 years potentially of a lot higher withdrawals. You might be taking a couple $100,000 from your wealth in 4 years until you wait to get your higher Social Security benefit. You can't have that money invested in highly volatile stock market type investments. That portion needs to be really safe and really conservative. So your Social Security strategy, as you get between 5 years, around at least 5 years if you can, at least make a decision roughly on what you think you'll do with Social Security, because then you can alter your investment portfolio to match that. Because most of the time markets are positive over 5 years, not always, but most of the time. But any 1 year, that's kind of a crapshoot. Like, you don't really know for sure. So you don't want to be making these decisions like too late, because you should be protecting a piece of your portfolio if you need to withdraw it to accommodate your Social Security strategy. That's how all that comes together. So as you think about it, what is on your menu? Are you doing the break-even analysis right with the cost of living adjustments, spousal benefits and team sport, let's call it, and break-even done right with the cost of lost growth? All of that together is how you think about Social Security. Obviously, we're happy to help people. This is our business. We do free consultations on Social Security all the time. We do have we'll go over how Social Security is taxed, but we also have a calculator that we are happy to give to people that they can understand that. But we'll teach people how to use that in a future episode. And basically what I'm hoping out of this is, if you want to get good with money, just follow us. Like, follow us. We're going to help you with it. And we're going to help you understand each step along the way so that you can organize, in this season at least, you can organize your retirement income from start to finish and feel really safe, or at least knowledgeable and secure of what you are going to have. And we'll help you through that whole process. Pensions next.
That's awesome.